Chapter 18, 6th grade. When I returned back to Ma'ale Ephraim, Grandma and I no longer lived back at 404, the two-bedroom apartment. After I left Dad, Mom left him too, and I moved to Tel Aviv, where she temporarily worked at the farm. Because the apartment 404 wasn't constructed well on its foundations, it was falling apart. And the Moatzah, the government of the settlement, deemed that apartment dangerous to live in. So we moved in for free into a larger house that was 2 stories and had 4 rooms. It was a good deal. The good part is that I was living next to my crush, Dima, whose parents Grandma was close friends with. But the bad part was that I was living close to my 6th grade mechanechet, Carmela. So she had her eyes on me. One time I went to the community swimming pool having a one-piece bathing suit and was playing with Dima, 15, splashing and goofing off, and his older brother, Roma, 21, with whom I was playing too. Told me I was plump and needed to lose weight. I took the matter seriously and the advice constructively. First, I prayed to God to make me beautiful. Second, I started working my abs out by religiously doing 50 crunches every day. And third, I kept my eating only to once a day. Grandma was uncomfortable by my forms of regimes and disciplines, but I was determined. My head was swirling, but I looked at models as a reference point to reach. In a few, maybe 2 months or less than that, I lost the baby fat, and folks, I had the typical hourglass figure. I looked stunning. One of my classmates recollects through Facebook that I was the most beautiful girl in the entire school. Guys in my class secretly drooled over me, but they were too young and didn't know how to start a proper conversation with me. I changed my image and started wearing stylish, expensive clothes and high heels to school. My body was very developed for my age. The upperclassmen were checking me out and taking it all in appropriately, but my classmates were confused. They didn't know what to do with me and my matured beauty. One of the 7th graders approached me and asked me how much I took for an hour. Is that a way to start a conversation with a girl? Well, I was 11, 12 years old. I looked like a matured 17-year-old. I flirted with the soldiers without any shame. I liked the attention around me. I liked the lustful looks of the older guys, but for some reason I was untouchable. My looks disarmed people of their sense of comfort. One time, as Grandma and I were in Shuk Ben Yehuda in Jerusalem, which was a bazaar much like farmer's market here, I wore a very modest but beautiful outfit with flashy colors. I wore a red pleated skirt up to the knees and a woolly blue shirt with my shoulders open. I looked elegant, and my presence glistened from afar. While Grandma was full of business trying to buy products, I waited for her in the middle of the walkway paths, and there was a guy nearby selling tomatoes and screaming in Hebrew, "Agvaniot, agvaniot, tomatoes, tomatoes." But all of a sudden, he looked at me and screamed, "Oi, eze yalda yafa!" Eze yalda yafa! Oh, what a beautiful girl. The entire Shuk Ben Yehuda started staring at me, and I really did turn into an agvania. One major highlight that I remember from Jerusalem was when I was barely ambling in my high heels and I was walking across the promenade of different shops where I saw crafty woodwork through one of the shop window of 3 monkeys stacked one on top of each other. The bottom held his hands over his mouth, the middle covering his ears, and the top one covering his eyes. I couldn't really understand what it meant at that age, but as I reminisce about that now, I understand that it meant speak no evil, hear no evil, see no evil. Which advice helped me cope with the absurdities of my situations more prudently later on in life. Another incident of ultimate giggles was when Mom and I were riding the bus from Jerusalem to Ma'ale Ephraim. The seating happened such that I sat next to a soldier and Mom sat in a seat behind us. I started talking up a storm with the soldier about mature topics unabashedly. We were talking back and forth and getting closer to each other. One conversation flourished into a vivacious game of ping pong of the mind. Suddenly he posed the "how old are you" question at me. I smiled and hesitatingly said 18. Mom snorted in the back out of panic as she was listening to our conversation, screamed at the lad, "How about 11? The soldier heard her, looked at me uncomfortably, swallowed up spit in his throat, and our lively conversation ceased. Mom killed the vibrant moment for me. I was so engaged with him, but the soldier refused to continue talking to me. I would have easily passed for 18. I looked the part and I played the part. Hadn't it been for Mom, we would have eloped to be married. Unfortunately, though, I was naive as to what it meant to be beautiful in this corrupted world that we are living in. Roma, Dima's brother, mentioned earlier, after I lost significant amount of weight, started paying attention to me and touching me in the rear while we were in the community swimming pool. I liked it, and I didn't know why I liked it. One time, he invited me to come to his house to help him clean, and I naively agreed. Thankfully, he himself said that he was not going to have sex with me because it was too young, and I didn't even know what he meant by the term having sex. Luckily, also, he couldn't go crazy with me because his youngest brother, Nicole, was 5 at the time, needed watching, and Dima and his parents were not at home, which is why Roma invited me to come over in the first place. Eventually, the attention cooled off because there was nothing he was able to do with me out of the ordinary. I noticed, though, that Dima was interested in me, and I made it obvious that I was interested in him too. When he was hanging with his boys and I with my girls, I danced all in an effort to earn his attention. But the problem was that he was too embarrassed to hang out with a 6th grader still in the Yesodi elementary school when he was a big and old 9th grader in the Tichon high school. Around late 2002, my grandma finally moved to live with my aunt in the United States, and Mom had to move in to live with me as the firm she was working at got shut down, and also because I had to have an adult living with me as I was still a minor. Around that time, I started sneaking into discos. Mom didn't mind, but the rule was that it was a disco for 7th grader and up with the soldiers. There were many soldiers stationed in our area because we were living in a settlement and needed protection. I was in 6th grade and Tanya was in 8th grade. She persuaded me to try and pass into the disco. She said I had a chance. Tanya also had a friend of whom I was always jealous when Tanya was hanging out with her, named Yulia. I found out later that Yulia committed suicide. Nevertheless, Tanya talked about going to discos in a way, saying, "What are you going to say to your children that you did when you were young? You have to live for the fun in life." She helped me put on all the makeup, chose all my clothes, and I looked like Britney Spears. I passed the guards with no problem. They were not checking IDs as they hoped that the appearance of people under the age would betray them. One thing must be added is that there was no alcohol served. Inside, the music was rhythmical, happy, with meaningful words. I found my place dancing with the soldiers, and they moved me with the ultimate skillfulness, dexterity, and gracefulness. I felt like a feather in their arms. All the people in the school were watching me with wonderment and jealousy. "Isn't this Alina? What is she doing here? She's a 6th grader," some of them would utter under their breath. There was a guy named Nissan Malka, who was a 7th grader, who took it upon himself to snitch to the guards on me. I was the star of the show, so the first time the guards didn't mind. The second time I got in all dressed up, and the guards told me that it would be the last time that they would allow me to be in. The third time they had to enforce the rules, and they kicked me out. With all this discoing, my grades dropped. I got a sudden 66% in Tanakh, Torah. Carmela, my teacher, approached me, waving the test in my face and started screaming at me in front of all of my peers. את לא מקבלת ציונים כאלה בתנ"ך. You are not going to get grades like that in Tanakh, girl, she demanded. I felt so ashamed of myself. It's indescribable. I felt so guilty that I deserted my studies for some kind of nonsense. My discoing years were over, my peacocking, my God-given beauty was over, and I started dressing appropriately again, which, by the way, one day, Carmela commented that my heels were too inappropriate for school and I needed to stop wearing them. For all truthfulness, I barely could walk on them. I took my studies seriously again, and I studied for my next test so thoroughly that I wanted to show off in front of Carmela as I wrote additional questions of my own and answered them. When I got the test back, I demanded her to give me extra credit. I got an 85%, and I complained to her why she hadn't noticed my own questions and given me 100-something%. She said that I was not the teacher, for which reason I didn't get to make up my own questions, and it wasn't fair in the big spectrum of things to all of my peers. Tanakh, Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim, Bible of Written Prophecies, was my favorite subject in school. Every year, we would focus on learning one of the 5 books of Moses. The way our tests were structured was that we studied every perek, chapter, depending on which book we were in. The teacher gave us questions with which we had to give 1 or 2 extended sentences as answers. There were about 20 questions like that in each test, and they were very specific. The Torah is originally written in Hebrew, but it is written in ancient Hebrew, so it is hard to understand it, even for native Hebrew speakers. The teachers explained in more modern terminologies each chapter as we took their notes from the board. It was like reading Shakespeare in elementary school. Most of our tests in all of our school subjects were structured like that of the Tanakh. Geography, history, you name it. It was doable, though, because all of our homework consisted of workbooks that we had to do on a daily basis. Not just textbooks when you do the reading without interactive reading. In the United States, there are mostly multiple choice question tests throughout your school career, which gave me a chuckle in comparison to what I had to go through while living in Israel. The only challenging process I had to go through in my studies in the United States was studying a brand new language and trying to think in it, not only speaking it. Please don't take me offensively, though, but the United States overall education curriculum is a joke. In the United States, I challenged myself by taking advanced placement and international baccalaureate honors classes. It is a shame, though, that all these honors classes are not actually regular classes extended and enforced under a uniform curriculum to all average-minded people. In Israel, there are no specialized, more challenging classes. Everybody is up against uniform standards and no one had a choice in the matter. Meanwhile, when Mom first moved in, before she had any men, we had precious time together. Daniel would come over and we would watch the Eurovision on TV, which was a singing contest amongst the different countries of the world. At the time, we would cheer for Israel and Russia, who had the group Tattoo representing Russia, our favorite youth band, the lesbian couple, who were not really lesbians, they just had that image. We would scream and cheer to the point that neighbors would summon the police. A police officer would come with a handsome soldier and ask us what was happening, why we were screaming. Mom flirtatiously answered that we were just watching the Eurovision and were overly excited about it. By the way, most of the world's countries appear in the contest, but the United States acts antisocial and does not participate. The United States doesn't even know it happens. Nobody represents the United States, and I wonder if it is because of the downtrodden culture that has been developed that the world doesn't think it is worth to even consider the talent of the United States. Nevertheless, the sweet and most cherishing times with Mom quickly vanished after she found Volodya, my previous art teacher, at which point I was no longer her priority. The problem was that he developed an interest for me and was getting to me through Mom. One time they came home and I was with my friends in the TV room upstairs. I just shouted to Mom not to come in because I was naked when in fact I was fully dressed. I just said that so that they wouldn't come in. Volodya slammed open the door with wide open eyes, expecting God knows what. Another time, he asked me if I would let him draw me. I agreed, so I posed, but he asked me to take off my pants so that there would be more detail, all in front of Mother. Thankfully, I had more respect for myself than to agree to that. Every time he would come over, there would be some kind of show. He would start spanking me for no reason in the living room while Mom wasn't there, and he and I would go in circles when I was trying to escape his grip over me while he was following me. I would tell Mom, but she would say that he was just disciplining me. I spoke against him right in front of him, and he didn't like it. He slammed the door so hard that he broke the lock off it, and Mom rushed after him and knelt down to him as he screamed at her, "I will not come back until you will discipline your daughter." Mom came right back through the door and slammed my head against the wall so hard that I thought I would lose consciousness. Then she went up in the bathroom and started crying hysterically. I didn't know what to do. I felt I was the parent. Most importantly, I felt so humiliated for the despicable scenery, hoping that neighbors didn't witness it. I was hesitant to approach her from fearing of getting another blow, but I didn't want to leave her crying, so I called Dad to talk to her, and I went walking at night to freshen up. The next morning when Tanya was over and I was in a nightgown, Mom said that she wished she had aborted me. And then she pulled up my nightgown sleeves and interlaced so that I wouldn't be able to wrestle her, and started choking me after throwing me on my bed and getting on top of me. Tanya tried to interfere and I accidentally bit her hand, thinking that it was Mother's. After the altercation, Mom left the house and I wondered how to fix the lock. Tanya said that her brother knew how to fix the lock, and he came over. Eventually, though, his friends found him at my house and asked him to hang out, but instead they started helping him. They fixed the lock but demanded that I pay them or else they wouldn't leave. Tanya's brother wasn't involved in this, but they turned on the TV and overtook the house. I had 300 shekels that Grandma had conserved for me over the years in a money box. I gave them 150 shekels, and thankfully they left before Mom came. Mom came home crying as usual, not noticing that the lock was fixed. She showed me a sketch that Volodya drew of her, which was a short, naked, stocky, and fat woman. I tried to talk some sense into Mom, explaining that he didn't deserve her. I never told anybody except my friend Tanya about our altercations. I didn't plan on telling in the first place, but she witnessed it. Some time passed and Mom cooled off, but she still hung out with Volodya, only this time she respected the fact that I didn't want him over. Meanwhile, Dad announced that he had found a religious-only girl boarding school in Tel Aviv, funded by religious Jewish Americans, that he attested had a higher level of education. He wanted me to go there for 7th grade. Tanya wanted to be with me, so I, and Mom, as our chaperone, went to interview at that school. I took tests and got accepted. Although it had a religious incline, the girls there were not from religious backgrounds, which made it permissible by me. Tanya got accepted into it as well. After that was established, Mom asked me if I wanted to visit Grandma in the United States, where she promised I would come back. I agreed, and Mom asked that I should talk to Dad to convince him to sign the forms of release because I was a minor, and he had me closed in case Mom wanted to get me out of the country indefinitely. In following her request, before the school year had passed, on Passover holiday when I visited him, Dad and I sat outside the house on a bench, and we started talking as my head leaned on his shoulder, enjoying the cool air and the serenity of the scene. "Dad, please release me to go visit Grandma," I timidly asked. "Alina, you would not come back," he said it with confidence. Of course I would come back. Where else I would go? Israel's my homeland, and Mom promises that it is just a visit for summer vacation. We have the school situation planned. I came back when I went to the United States at 4 years old, so I would come back again. Dad, what is your problem? Just release me for 2 months, please. I begged. For some weird reason, I don't know why I was so determined to go. I was completely naive and unsuspicious of Mom's actual plans. I don't know if it is because of my lifestyle or what. I hate adventures. I hate moving places, hate seeing new places. I just want to stay at one spot and leave me all alone. But back then, I guess I was very eager for adventure. I cried and begged. What do you want to stay? Do you want to stay with your religious family? Being beside your dad is not good enough for you? He asked while instilling Jewish guilt on me. Staying with my super religious family was beyond any of my imagination. I led a completely different lifestyle. I was a party girl and they were very conservative people. The idea to stay there indefinitely was just inconceivable, completely unthinkable. I wouldn't think they would even want me. It was fun when I visited there last time, but I didn't think it would be even possible to stay there. I was so foolish at the time, but I answered, I would never forgive you for robbing me of the experience. I did not let my dad be until he finally agreed to test my chances and signed the forms of my release. Mom bought two-way tickets on June 29, 2003, a day before school let out. I even showed my dad the tickets and convincingly told him that I was coming back and he shouldn't worry. I repeatedly asked Mom to confirm that it was for a visit, and Mom repeatedly reassured me that it was just a visit. 2 weeks before my scheduled flight, Grandpa Peter came to visit. Then, a couple of days later, he went to visit his relatives in Haifa, who I was not familiar with. Mom asked me to talk to Carmela to give me my final grade certificate, Teudat Ziyun, early. I thought that was reasonable because I was going to the next school in Tel Aviv after I came back, so I needed to have my grade certificate before I left. I explained to Carmela my situation, and she had it prepared for me. She hugged me, gave me a kiss, and said, "B'atzlacha, היית תלמידה למופת. אני אתגעגע אלייך. Good luck. You have been an exemplary student. I will miss you." I knew I was Carmela's favorite. She was my teacher for most of my elementary school for 1st, 2nd, and 6th grade, so she knew me very well. She was strict, tough-loving at the same time. She had my butt working. A day before leaving Ma'ale Ephraim, I was with Tanya. Mom said, "Say goodbye to her. You might not see her ever again." I should have taken that as a straight insinuation, stopped everything, and refused to go. The further we went into it, the more it was apparent that Mother had devised something completely out of sync with what she was saying. "Mom, I'm coming back," I said in panic. "Yes, you're coming back," she irritatingly answered me. "So what do you mean I'm not going to see Tanya?" I asked in a matter-of-fact way. "I'm just saying that anything can happen," she covered herself up on the slip-up. Because the future is in fact uncertain, I thought she meant that in case I die, the plane crashes, or Tanya would change her plans, or something like that would justify Mother saying that I would not see Tanya again. I dismissed my panic and decided not to continue digging and dwelling on it. I packed up a small, tiny suitcase with a few clothes. I left everything of value, my drawings, my other clothes, stylish ones, thinking that I needn't worry because I'm coming back. Dear readers, I'm coming back.